blue?
Yeah, at the bottom. It says
Yeah.
security.
Carson, can you please speak into the microphone?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Say exactly your thing.
Is that better?
No,
Is that better?
yes.
Okay, not used to it. Anyway, under D, standards and approvals, 3 vehicles. What was the specific question on that?
They're references. Is it okay if I do
You,
it here?
yeah, I can hear you
They're
fine.
just references to the zoning ordinances. So the first one under security, the vehicles it references on page VI 16, it lists the different types of things where you might have traffic impact study. And it specifically lists mineral extraction, including oil and gas wells.
Yeah, we have to add this. I have a note in my draft that we have to add water withdrawal as well.
Okay, so you're gonna add that in there?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and then the next one was the security. It references 575, which is on page, not 575, it's references. The security thing talks about it's not group homes, it says like drug, and it sort of references like it's security for locations where people stay, and we're talking about security for a well operation.
Do you mean security deposit or like physical security?
No, just physical security.
Okay.
Right.
And my only question is, if I was somebody coming in and I was gonna reference that, I'd be going like, but this paragraph refers to like a mental, that's not a good term.
Well, it actually refers.
Mental health facility.
Yeah, it references a mental health facility, but we're gonna apply it to general security, but if you read the paragraph, it doesn't necessarily sound like it's general security.
Right.
This
I
is
mean,
in our code?
That section applies to all commercial uses.
Right, but if you read the paragraph,
Okay, I got you. So, let me just write myself a note.
it says, first line says,
I understand.
okay, good enough.
Add addition, I'm just writing myself a note. Examples,
Yeah, it should be like such as, but not limited to.
something like that, yeah.
Right. That better not be.
Or maybe I just take out those other, maybe just delete the 2 examples that are in there, because it's intended to apply to any commercial.
Right, right. I thought that's what you meant, but it just, if you read it, it sounds like.
No, understood.
And then the last question I wrote, and I didn't write all the rest because I saw Jessica was following up on all the amounts and stuff, but for the abandonment part, is it possible to have a security deposit or?
That, I mean, I've seen them written for other other uses. I think that's a question for the solicitor. I think, if he feels comfortable that we, include a security deposit, we can do that.
Yeah, because I would think there's one reason, I mean, it might go out of business just because lack of water or something of that nature, but if it goes out of business because the company goes out of business, how are they going to pay to restore it back the way it's supposed to be?
Right.
So you're talking about some kind of security place at the beginning of the project?
Yeah.
And we hold it so that, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
security, maybe security deposit isn't the right term, but.
Well,
No, well, no, that's, I just wanted to make sure that
Right, right,
that
right. I
was one
wanted-
of the questions I had.
Yeah, I didn't want to confuse security with the other security.
right.
So,
Okay.
so in this draft that we got from Buckingham Township, there's a whole section on standards for abandoning wells, and that it's their responsibility to take care of this. So I don't know if we would need a security deposit, if it's their responsibility, or how does that work?
Well, the security deposit, it would be their responsibility no matter what. But if they don't take care of it, rather than us just having to go to court, we have their money.
Okay.
So if they want their money back, it's more incentive for them to take care of it.
Okay, so
So,
It'll never happen today. You can't get bonding for that.
for a well abandonment,
Yeah.
okay. We'll write a note that it could be.
So, I mean, if you can't get bonding for it,
there's no sense in including it.
there's no
Right.
sense in putting it
Now, am I correct if they, for the large scale, if they are abandoning it, there will be DEP, DRBC?
Yeah, I think DEP has
Right.
well abandonment standards, yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's just make sure, because the DEP and the DRBC have made it very clear to me that they do not regulate so much of these operations unless we are requiring them to. So just because the DEP has commercial well standards, if we don't require it on our ordinance for them to have commercial well standards, then they will not have to abide by that, because it's not Pennsylvania law. We have to put it in.
Right, they only do it, what, over 100,000 gallons?
Well, that's the DRBC, but as far as well construction and as far as well construction and abandonment in general, all of that is regulated by the DEP, but it is not a requirement. So we can set it into us for them to be required to do it by their standards, but if we don't put it in there, that doesn't mean that they automatically do it. So that's all I'm saying. So we would have to look that up and make sure that we add that to our
So
legislation.
do we have to say in there that it has to be also governed by those standards for them to apply? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so that's,
Say that again?
Or do we have to say in the ordinance that those standards also apply in addition to ours? I think it's in here, he said that, but
There's a general section that applies to all commercial and industrial that requires compliance with all applicable state, federal, and.
okay, but not wells, just to be clear, not well construction, commercial well construction.
No.
Okay.
In the zoning ordinance, in Article 7, there's a general section that applies to all commercial and industrial development in the borough. And one of those sections says that they have to comply with other applicable state and federal standards. I can add it in here if people feel more comfortable that way.
Yeah.
But just so you're aware-
I think the point was, right now, it's not a standard, it's not a DEP standard.
Yes, it is. DEP has
Didn't you just say it's not a DEP?
no,
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Jessica.
thank you.
Didn't you just say that DEP doesn't?
It doesn't, for well construction and anything that has to do with commercial wells, the DEP and the DRBC, the state doesn't require it. Now, the DEP and,
That's, you
okay,
can stop. Now, you're saying it does, so we got two different things going on here.
Yeah.
No, I think Jessica is saying that that DEP doesn't have any standards for construction. But I think Jake is saying that they have standards for abandonment.
okay,
No, they have standards for construction.
they do.
So, for instance, a non-community transient water supply is what it's called. You can look it up on PADEP. Non-community transient water supply has standards. It tells you that the well has to go to the ground so far, and the steel casing has to go into solid rock. The steel casing has to be
Right.
40 feet into the bedrock from the surface and 3 feet above the surface, and they have all these standards, and that's for non-community.
But what we're talking about here is abandonment. Do they have standards for abandonment?
So I don't know. I don't even know if DEP has knowledge of what wells are out there.
Right, but that's not my question. Do we know, do they or do they not have standards for abandonment? We'll have to check that.
Probably for new wells, but not for old
Right.
wells. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't think that was Jessica's question, though.
To
You were saying that
clarify-
in general, not just abandonment. right?
Yeah, to clarify what I mean about this is, yes, the DEP has well standards, but the companies are not required to follow those standards if we do not put that in our legislation. That's what the DRBC told me. So as long as we put in our legislation to follow the DEP standards, they're actually pretty strict. So if abandonment is included in that, they would have fairly strict standards. I don't know if it is or
Okay,
not.
now you just.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
You said DEP doesn't have standards, and then you said DRBC said if we put in our ordinance that they have to follow the DEP standards, they have to follow them.
No, I meant that the DEP doesn't set the standards for our legislation. So while they have good well construction standards, they're not,
Okay.
yeah, do you see what I mean?
No, that's why we're doing
Okay,
all this.
it's okay,
We know
it's
we have
okay.
to set the standards ourselves.
Yeah,
Okay, so I understand that. They don't have standards for existing.
No, they have standards,
but we're just not,
They have standards, but
but
not.
those standards don't cover our wells unless we say it does.
yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, but applicable, it's not applicable because they don't have to apply to those things unless we say they have to apply to those things. So just saying that they have to comply with all applicable standards doesn't mean that they have to comply with the DEP standards, because
What would we say?
so we
Must comply with DEP regulations.
comply with DEP regulations, and actually, there is extensive information on how Buckingham Township is doing that in this. So I highlighted everything. I just have to go through and find, yeah.
To be honest with you, I have questions on that.
Yeah.
I thought that was an extremely difficult piece of documentation to try and read and understand. There's no way anyone is, except the chart, I really like the chart.
I mean, there is.
There's no way anybody's going to be able to explain this to anybody.
Well, the companies are aware because the companies already deal with this. This is what the DRBC has them do too. And Buckingham Township has been dealing with these operations for a really long time. It's the company's responsibility to hire the professionals who understand this content. So, of course, we're not scientists, but they have to hire the people that understand what this is saying.
That's the way we're doing everything, yeah.
I understand some of
Okay.
it because I've had like 7 hours worth of phone meetings with the DRBC at this point, but of course, a lot of it I don't fully understand. I understand the gist of what it's supposed to do.
Could you guys talk about the quantities before I go? Jessica, could you just talk
The
about that?
quantities,
Okay, so you mean the Q7, the flow rate?
Well, the amount of gallons, those right in the beginning of this thing. where it
Okay,
says-
so the DRBC recommended that we start at 10,000 gallons for our large-scale water extraction, because that's what they're doing in southeastern
No,
Pennsylvania.
wait, per day.
Per 10,000 per day over a 30-day period.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you said per hour, you meant per day.
I meant per day, sorry about that.
So this is on the first page here, under
Yeah.
conditional use, the large-scale extraction,
Mhm.
where we're looking for an answer there?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
they said 10,000 should do it, because they don't start regulating until the 100,000 mark. And they actually told me that even if they were taking more, they might not regulate us because we are so far away from the Delaware River Basin that if we're not impacting the actual waters in the project down there, that we could fall outside of the regulations for a number of reasons.
well, we sure have to pay enough money for our wastewater
I'm
treatment
saying-
plant, water treatment
Yeah,
plant.
and they're awfully concerned
I'm
with the
sure.
releases from the Francis
But
Walters
we
Dam.
we're not far from the basin, we're in the basin.
But it
Yeah.
may not, but they said it might not impact the actual basin, and that this is happening with a lot of creeks and small
Well,
areas.
That's what they're gonna pull, then I'm not paying them permit fees anymore.
I'm just telling you what they told me.
Oh, I believe it.
So I was under the
They
impression,
just like tripled our permit fees with no notice.
Jesus.
It's ridiculous. And they do nothing. So for someone to
Yeah.
come out and do work, and we haven't seen a person in 3 years.
Okay, so 10,000 gallons is for those first two, the third paragraph down under, right on the first page, and then down under use regulations, it goes in there as well?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
And it's gonna be the definition, Jessica said 10,000 gallons per day over 30-day period,
Period.
is that how you said it?
Yeah. I guess that's what it's,
When you say over a 30, do you mean the 10,000 gallon per day average?
the average, yeah.
So one day they could do 11, one day they could do 9, but as long as they average out.
Well, I guess we would need to, Carson, I thought that you had that number figured out with this draft, because this says blank gallons or more of groundwater, and it's not clear, and I thought at the last meeting that we talked about this being per day over a 30-day
Yeah,
period.
right,
Okay.
that's what we're saying per day.
Okay. Per day over a 30-day period.
Well, wouldn't clear 10,000 gallons per day average over 30 days?
Yeah. Now, in this draft from because we're talking about extraction rates, this draft from Buckingham Township also has regulations for any commercial operation that might operate under the 10,000 gallons per day as well. So they have their wells classified. They have class 1, which I don't think we would need because it seems like it's just purely for residential, but they also have a class 2 well that is for business or commercial operations under 10,000, and they have specific regulations on there for that as well. So that's something that we might want to consider, just to be.
Did they class individual wells up to, was it up to 3 wells? And then you could have a community well where somebody drills and provides to like 4 houses or 6 houses
Yeah.
or something.
So this
And then
one,
you go up to water extraction. But we could have those situations in our borough,
right,
depending on how properties are developed. You could have somebody that drills a well and supplies water to multiple houses.
right, right. So
Let me-
this
let
is
me ask
talking
you a
about water
question
clusters.
here. We talk about the extraction or collection. Let's say if, somebody wants to locate in the industrial district, they're served by water, rural water.
Can you
right?
guys just speak into the microphone a little bit more? Because we can't pick you up on the camera.
The,
Pull it down.
there you go.
You can pull it closer to you. They really, I mean, they move, you know?
The industrial district is served by borough water, right? Does the borough allow individual wells to be drilled within their service area?
Well, the industrial district is so small, and it's mainly the railroad tracks.
Yeah, but that's not my question. My question is, if somebody wants to put in a business in the borough, in any area that's served by central water, does the borough water authority allow them to drill an individual well?
I thought you only had to hook up to the surge system. I thought that was the only requirement.
No, it's both. It depends on how far you are away from
So it's the same
the
500
existing
foot.
system, same type, yeah, same, and I think it's the same distance.
So,
So like, for the example is the beer and liquor store down at Market. They drilled the well because they weren't close enough to get to or hook up to our system. And I think because of the topography and the rocks and everything.
So then the
Is
market's
that
not on?
right? They drilled the well, or maybe it's septic, maybe I have it backwards.
Well, it couldn't be septic, because septic that goes right by there.
Oh, so that doesn't mean you can hook up right there.
Well,
So-
the market's gotta be on septic.
anyway, getting back to my point here is that if we're only gonna allow, well, that may not apply to, I think that, I guess what I'm getting at is under conditional use where it says the extraction or collection, it should be the use, extraction, or collection. Because somebody might be putting in a business or an industry that would be connecting to the borough water supply, so they wouldn't be extracting or collecting water, they'd be using the borough
Well,
system.
let me stop 1 second. Back to James's question. The industrial district is not just down at, it's also up by,
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
right, and that doesn't have water maybe up there?
But let's focus on,
I know, but your supposition, whatever, is if it's in the industrial zone,
no,
it's served by.
if it's anywhere, if it's in anywhere where it's served by borough water. So what I'm saying is, we have to include, it says the use, extraction, or collection of, because they might be served by borough water, so they wouldn't be extracting or collecting, they'd be connecting to the system. So I think that we need to do that as a point of clarification.
Okay.
So we also have here in the definition for large-scale water extraction, it says for off-site consumption, that is actually very particular to water bottle companies. So if we were to include the different types of regulations that we are writing, because right now this is an ordinance only for water bottle companies. This wouldn't be for fracking, this wouldn't be for agriculture, this wouldn't be for any type of water or any type of extraction that keeps the water within, that it leaves it within the zone that it's in. So if we change that language, then maybe there will be a distinction between the two different types of extraction that you're talking about.
Say that last bit again.
I said, would there be if we change the language and we include like on-site consumption as well, or on-site usage, then wouldn't that help to make a distinction between the two different things that we're talking about here?
Do we need to make a distinction?
Well, is this just for
If-
water
if they're
bottles,
gonna
or is this
bottle,
for?
if they're gonna use water to, let's say, bottle, Coca-Cola, that would still be off-site consumption.
Okay, so what are you talking about then if they're hooking up to our water lines? Maybe I'm just misunderstanding what was said.
Well, because, let's say a bottling company comes in, and they're gonna use, 20,000 gallons per day. Okay, they may be able to get that through the water company, but that use may also be a depletion of the water company's supply.
It would.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're talking all about off-site consumption. We weren't talking about any type of,
I think what he's trying to tell you, Jess, is you could either put it in a tanker truck, pull it out, put it in a tanker truck and take it,
okay,
or you could actually get it from the borough and package it into water bottles.
Well,
oh, well, that would still be for off-site consumption, because it wouldn't be going back into the
I
ground.
understand that, but still, what if there is an on-site that uses this much water? Would there be anything that could be on-site that would use this much?
Fracking,
My
and
development is gonna
agriculture.
use-
And one at a time.
Okay. Go on, Jake, I'm talking enough.
My development is gonna use more than 10,000 gallons per day.
And
Roughly,
what's
we
that?
use,
What's that for?
residential development.
Community well.
And the only reason is because the borough cannot give me any more water because the DRBC won't grant them permission to release, to extract any more water.
Yeah, but we also can't pump it up to you either.
Well, I could pump it up.
But then again, that's not off-site consumption,
Right.
That's what we're asking for.
Mhm.
right?
Should we have something in here that is on-site consumption?
I mean, the only thing that would.
Fracking,
well,
and
fracking-
yes, and fracking's a big deal. And just because we aren't in the correct landscape
No,
that one
I
would typically see it,
understand that. I understand that.
So-
Well, that's off-site
Yeah.
consumption.
no, fracking is on-site consumption because it pushes the water straight back down.
All right.
So we have to write,
Yeah, I
we need to write
know.
a zoning ordinance to prevent fracking in our community.
I don't know that we can prevent, yeah.
You can't-
We would have to
regulate,
yeah,
not prevent.
Right, you know what I mean?
yeah.
That's another one we'll have to write.
It should, well, honestly, it should be done with this because that is also considered large-scale water extraction.
It's, right, it's
Yeah.
a large use for water.
Yeah, agriculture is another thing. Somebody could, put a little farm and they might want to pump up a lot of water. That would be considered on-site consumption because they're just watering their own plants. But, we still have to make sure that they're handling their wells properly and whatnot, so.
Well, so maybe what we just need to do then is just say surface water for off-site or on-site consumption. All right?
Large volume.
And groundwater, yeah. Groundwater, surface water, spring water, and everything for off-site consumption and on-site consumption.
For off-site or on-site consumption.
Right, and you set the quantity with the 10,000 gallons.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I gotta run to my other meeting, so I don't know if you'll still be going, I'll try to make it back, but
Mike, I do have live streams going, so you can watch it from Facebook.
reading what's the name of the other municipality?
Buckingham Township.
Buckingham. I still think the idea that they give the different classes of wells a good idea. Jake just gave an example.
Yeah,
He doesn't necessarily have to drill one well in every, what's your lot size, is half acre? He doesn't have to drill one well in every half acre. He could drill a well up there and feed all of his half acres if he wants to. And so we don't really have anything on the record for that. That's not large scale extraction, it's somewhat, but
but it's well classification, and we should have a well ordinance in conjunction with this.
and any of the remaining property that could be developed, they could do the same thing.
Actually, they'd have to do the same thing because you can't take more water out of the
Yeah.
creek.
So I mean, I don't think we should just discourage looking at the Huntington, whatever it is, Huntington thing. For some.
Well, I hope we're not looking at it, because I highlighted everything. Do you see this?
What did you say?
I said, I don't think we should just discard what they wrote, because I think there's a lot of good points in there. And the last point, and I always say this before I go out the door, the other issue is, and I'll give you a prime example. I've lived in my property for 40 years, and I have a well there. The remaining property gets sold on the mountain. We don't want to regulate individual well drillers, but guess what? Everybody that has a well there is affected by every other well that's drilled into the same aquifer.
That's in here too.
Right. So again,
Well, and that's fine,
Yeah.
if you said numerous times you don't wanna hurt the residents, and you don't wanna
Well, that's why
regulate the
there's,
residents.
well, that's why there's well classifications. And there is a distinction between residential use and commercial use. Am I the only one who read this?
No, I read it, and I
Okay.
was very, very confused, and I had a lot of questions, because I felt there was contradictory stuff in it.
I think maybe what we need is, and I don't know, but maybe we need to have a separate, usually it's, a municipality adopts a well ordinance, it's a standalone ordinance, not a zoning ordinance. Okay, so maybe you need to have an ordinance, a separate ordinance that addresses individual wells in addition to the large-scale water extraction.
yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm just saying, don't forget about that part of what Huntington wrote, because I think there's some good stuff.
But you have to remember too, if you're gonna apply this to residential, if you use the 10,000 gallons per day average, if you, and
It's gonna
DEP,
be
No, no,
the majority of your residential.
I'm not saying it for that. I'm just saying the Huntington thing that she's referring to has Buckingham, whatever, and TON. It has well classifications. I don't think that we should just overlook the individual wells, nor do I think we should overlook the mid-level one where somebody could drill to serve 4 or 5 homes,
Yeah.
because that could happen. So somewhere we should think about protecting that.
right, and I think that would be better off in a standalone ordinance, because in a standalone ordinance, you have more direct enforcement than you do.
Okay, I'm okay with that, as long as we don't forget about it.
But what I was getting at, if we would apply to all uses, the use regulations there in subsection B, if we apply that to all uses, the 10,000 gallons or more, and DEP uses, I think, 400 gallons per dwelling unit per day, as far as water consumption, that means any development with 25 homes or more would come under the classification of a large-scale water extraction. And I'm not sure we want to do that.
Well, I would say-
I understand what you're saying, but maybe they do want to do that. Maybe
I don't
that's
know,
what they're
I'm
saying.
just pointing that out.
Yeah.
To be discussed, but what's the difference if development takes out that amount of water, or a company comes in and takes, it's still gonna affect the aquifer, right? So there should be some thought into that.
The development, the water's put back into the ground, for the most part.
Well, unless it goes into the sewage system.
Unless it goes into the sewage, right? that's-
Right.
Okay, if you go past 7:30, I'll try to be back.
Anyway. So. I think, if you want to regulate residential, I think you're better off doing that. If you want to regulate well construction and abandonment, that might be better off in a standalone ordinance.
So I also
But
want
do we
to,
need to do we need that figured out before we include this in our zoning ordinance?
absolutely, 100% yes. Yes, because all of the things in this well ordinance is what protects our water supply. It's what creates the safety that's needed for the wells.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but if you're gonna do a standalone ordinance, that may be 6 months to a year down the road.
This project has been in the works for years. I should not have been the first person to bring this up. So it's not my fault that it's going to take long.
A well ordinance has not been in the works for years.
No,
The zoning ordinance.
the zoning ordinance. So
Right.
but this has been on the table. This large-scale water extraction ordinance has been included in the ordinance in the project since we got this grant. So if this is the first,
I understand that. Can I finish what I was saying? At this time, if a well ordinance is going to take us that much time, we may want to have some kind of regulations for in the zoning ordinance for the large-scale water withdrawal.
we cannot do that without the well standards because
Okay, well, then who's going to do the well standards? Because this is a grant, it's on a timeline.
should have thought about that before. I guess we have to do it in less time. Because if we don't have well construction standards, then our water can be depleted, we can suffer from pollution, we don't have to have any testing standards. This is a
Okay,
vital
just
part
let
of
me
a large-scale
understand.
water
Right
extraction
now,
operation.
We don't have any of those standards. We don't even have large-scale water, so
Okay, this is worthless without this. I said that in the email, and I'm gonna say it again. This is
Okay, all right,
5
fine.
page,
You don't have to
okay.
say it 10 times.
Okay,
All right, so council will have to decide who they want to do that.
we have a
That's
wonderful,
outside of the scope of this.
we have a wonderful copy right here. We can make a draft out of this. It shouldn't take too long. Carson brought us a draft from
Well, okay,
Edgemont
now,
Township for 27
that's-
pages.
It's your opinion that that's a wonderful copy. It's not for everybody. Other people have questions on it, so that's, I don't know, and maybe we need to have somebody who specializes in that kind of stuff come and help us out.
It was recommended that Penn State Extension get involved. It was recommended by the DRBC that we had already should have had other professionals involved with this. They were kind of surprised that we didn't have anybody else involved helping us with this. So yes, we should.
Well, because we're working on a zoning ordinance, not a well
Okay,
ordinance.
but this is an ordinance that requires wells. So this cannot be the first time that this came to anybody's mind.
Did they give you a name for,
They recommended the Penn State Extension in
did they give you
particular.
a contact name for Penn State?
Penn State, we have one,
Extension?
they said we could call our Penn State Extension here in town. They said any Penn State Extension should be able to help us or at least direct us to the correct department. Let me see who else I got. I got lots of notes.
Penn State has standards.
Yeah,
It's all on their websites.
yeah, and they'll help us figure out.
It's all part of the
Carson, did you
organization
read
that I
over
serve
this-
on.
This well ordinance you did from Buckingham, right?
I did.
Okay, a big question that I had, and it would also pertain to our draft for the zoning. Where would the borough's wells fall into this? If the borough needed to drill a well to serve the residents, if one of our wells went dry or
Well,
whatever may happen.
it seems to me, I'm not sure, I don't think the borough could exempt itself from its own ordinance.
Pardon me?
I don't believe the borough could exempt itself from its own ordinance, so if, you know, I would think the borough would have to comply with this.
Okay.
I mean, the one thing that I noticed on the first page of that Buckingham is it says it was approved in 2003, and that it will be amended. Is this the latest version?
This is what they,
Right, but you see my note, you see the note there.
yes. But this is, when I asked for the
Right.
ordinance,
what
this
we
is what
gave you.
I was given.
Right. You know, as far as the well construction standards, I mean, I hate not to include, well, I don't know, the council has to decide what they want to do in terms of, you know, the well ordinance compared, you know, in reference to, you know, the large scale water extraction. I would think one possibility would be to just, you know, to keep the large scale water extraction in and just apply it to non-residential uses, because then at least you have some protection.
We do not. This offers us zero protection. There's nothing protective in here whatsoever. I have gone in detail over this document.
Okay, well,
I don't know how many times I have to repeat
I
that.
understand that's, that's your
I,
opinion.
it's not my opinion. It's the
It is
opinion
your
of the federal regulating agency. That is the opinion that I am going by.
Okay, so it's an opinion.
but what
It's an
I'm
opinion
getting at-
based on fact, and I seem to be the only one who's made these phone calls and who has done any of the homework. So maybe you guys should listen to me. Our consultant says that he's never done this before, right? So am I the only one who has any information on this whatsoever?
But, I mean, what it says in here is that they have to do the hydrogeologic study,
Yeah,
and they have to provide all of this information. the
Yeah.
subsurface- What's that?
yes,
Right?
yes.
I'm talking about in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, but there's no details about what is included in that. They have to provide security deposits. There's all kinds of stuff that has to be done. There's a lot more details that need to be included into this. This was done very haphazardly, very haphazardly.
Okay, so what are your suggestions for what we should be doing?
We should include this we should include well standards in this ordinance. So if we're not going to, if you
No, it
don't,
should be in a standalone
Okay, well then it needs to be done in conjunction with this so that we have protection. Because if there is no testing done on the wells, if there
Okay,
is,
so
yeah.
what kind of standards are you recommending?
We have to have a certain amount of testing done. It's all listed in here. Their testing, I've read through this, the testing and everything that they
Are
have.
you basically saying you want us to adopt the Buckingham ordinance?
I want us to adopt the standards that they have in here for well testing, for well permits and building processes, for the water testing that needs to be done, for the appeals process, for that the residents could, challenge it if their water table starts getting
Okay,
depleted.
and did you go over that with the RBC?
Did I go over this with DRBC? The DRBC said yes, this is the one they recommended to me based on the conversations that we had.
Can I ask you a couple questions on it that I have?
I can try to give you the best answers that I have. Let me pull up my paper, my notes that I took on my thing for my phone calls. Go ahead, ask your questions.
Okay, in section C of the permit application procedure,
Give us a page number.
page 5. Yes. So section C, number 3, this is for class 2 and 3 well. Well drilling permit must be filed prior to the submission of any application under their subdivision and land development ordinance concerning any property which the wells are to serve. So how does that work if you don't have a subdivision plan? How can you do this? That's what I was, and I even have, Jake, your development as an example. If you didn't have your preliminary plan for your development, how are you able to get a well drilling permit when you don't yet know what you're doing?
Well, isn't that why we should do both of these at the same time?
So PADEP
No, that's not what this says.
will say get preliminary approval and then apply for these outside agency permits.
Right, and I would think if you want a well drilling permit and a well utilization permit for your subdivision, you need to know how many homes you're gonna be serving in that subdivision.
That's correct.
So I was confused as to
Right.
why this should be done prior to subdivision and land development.
Okay, so quick question. Let's say we do it your way, right? And we just let this go through. So then,
That's not what I'm saying.
no, I just want to know, so then what happens when because that's what you are saying, that we need to finish this and then we need to come back to
No,
this.
that's not
So,
what she's saying. She's trying to sort out what's in this, in the Buckingham ordinance to see how it would apply to the borough. So what she's suggesting there is in number 3, it says for class 2 or 3 well must be filed prior to the submission of any application. I would say, must be filed as part of.
okay. That's it.
See what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
Yeah, all right.
yeah.
I'll write that down.
And again, then on page 6, this is even for a class, let's see, class 1 well plot plan shall be supplied, and 2 and 3 again, this is for. They're looking for plans with property lines and location of proposed and existing building. They're looking for everything that is included in your subdivision plan, but they don't want you to do the subdivision plan, so that's kind of tied together.
Right, I think if you made that first correction, that would probably clarify that.
And then if you go down a little bit, they talk about,
But for me, it's not clear. So in other words, what you're saying, for class 1, it's just the plot plan, but for class
Yeah.
2, it's all of the rest of it.
right,
Okay.
The presumption is class 1 is residential.
Right.
Right.
Residential or something serving 3 or less dwelling units, right?
and then if you go down a little bit further, they're asking for a separate map to be submitted showing location of the production wells, and there is no definition of a production well in here. I couldn't find that. That was just a comment that you
That's
had there.
confusing.
I have a number of questions about technical stuff on this. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert, but I know what needs to be done to keep our water supply safe. And a lot of that is included on this.
Okay, that's fine, but, you know, stuff like these words where there's no definitions, we're better off making sure that we have definitions now.
Okay.
And I don't know, Carson, if you know this or not, this is page 13. Number 2, the drilling of wells in the certain formations. I didn't know if any of those formations were.
No, you would have to look at the geological
Okay.
formations, you know,
Do we
in
have any of them in our area?
yeah, those are more south.
I know, we have to look that up. And if we don't, is there, yeah, we're looking to, there's something.
Yeah, we can find those.
A different one we want to
in
put
the
in.
soil survey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then number 3, again, it references water-bearing formations, and there's no definitions for that either.
Well, I mean, a water-bearing formation is just kind of a term of art that somebody looking at this would know what that means.
I looked at it and I didn't know what it means.
When was the last time you drilled a well?
And what is a pitless adapter?
What?
A pitless adapter, that's on page 14.
Well, and that's, again, that's a term of art that farmers use.
So a pitless adapter is where the well pipe that comes from the water source comes up and goes out the side of the well below the frost level. That's the pitless adapter,
Okay,
okay, so that the water line doesn't freeze.
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
So when they all conform with the DEP, I mean, that to me is what should be standard. I mean, I have a well, I'm very curious about this. I'm highly interested.
So the wells are all drilled by licensed well drillers.
Right, correct.
And they know all these
Years,
rules,
right.
and they want to comply because they don't want to get into trouble.
Most of them.
Most of them is right, I know some.
I haven't met anybody that wants to get into trouble today.
I haven't either, you know, but it's, that part is more for the borough to help protect our residents.
My grandson wants to get in trouble sometimes.
Huh?
I said, my grandson wants to get in trouble sometimes.
And then on page 14, I had a question of this, the minimum separation distances.
Right.
Well, they have to be,
And, they're requiring a survey be done. But unless I miss something, I don't see where the results of the survey mean anything. Because you can still put the well,
The reason for that is because a well has to be 100 feet from a septic
Right.
system.
right.
That's,
well, I understand that, but
I just thought that it meant that the survey would show where all of these different things
Right.
are, like it would show where the drain field was, it would show where the cesspool was, and then, once that was identified, then it would have to be the certain distance of feet.
And unless somebody's putting a well on an existing lot, you know, the process would be is they have to come in for zoning approval for the dwelling unit, which would involve a plot plan. And on that plot plan, the zoning officer would typically, and the sewage enforcement officer, you know, would typically require, you know, on the plot plan that all of these be shown.
well, are for the on-lot well and septic,
Yes.
the sewage officer does
Yeah,
require that because we do have a well ordinance and he issues permits.
Right.
So I'm sure it's nothing like this though.
Well, right.
Really a very
but-
simple little thing.
Typically, showing those isolation distances for a new well is part of the process. Put it that way.
Okay, on page 17, in the water resources testing, A4, it says that additional quality testing shall be required for specific potential, if a specific potential for contamination exists. And how would that be determined and by whom? Did you talk about that with them, Jessica?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I would assume if it's, that's a good question. And there on page number 5, they specify DEP standard for intended use, class 3 wells.
Mhm. I'm not clear if this ordinance says, and again, Jake, I'm just gonna use your development because it's the newest one in the area. If we require all of this stuff, does Jake have to go through and do these analysis and testing and all that? And once he has that done, then for the class one, do the individual property owners have to come back and redo it? I kind of thought that's what this was saying.
I would say
That's on
so.
page 18.
I mean, it depends on who's drilling the well. And if Jake would have a community system and he's drilling a well.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Jake would have to do it,
if
right?
he did not have a community system, you say there was.
Individual wells, right.
Yeah, if they were all individual.
I would say each individual one, if the lot is sold and somebody's gonna build a house and put in a well on that lot, they would have to comply with this.
So it would be done twice. The developer would have to do it, and then the individual would have to do it
Well,
at the
no,
time of the building.
no, I mean, this would only be one of,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm
You're
not
saying it
sure.
should be.
It's not
I'm
clear.
asking if that's how it's written in here.
right. It's
Well,
not
do we-
clear here.
Do we want to include what they have for class one wells? You know, we don't have to include anything that doesn't suit our borough or that isn't a protective measure for the water table.
Well, from a practical standpoint, you know, a class one well is still punched down into the aquifer.
What did you say? I couldn't hear you say
I
that.
said a class one well, which is for an individual dwelling unit, is going into the same aquifer as a class two or class three well, it's just that they're pumping less water. So, you know, the potential is there for contamination.
So the way to
But-
limit
but-
that,
All right, I'm just thinking, if the developer has to go through for the subdivision, he's already doing the testing, show that we should show,
Right.
but then again, if he does it, yes, did you test wells, yeah.
no, let me
So if he
explain.
does it in 2020, and then the lots aren't sold until 2030, what else has been developed in the area?
So
So maybe the individuals need to.
developers do not, test lots that have individual wells. They don't do that.
According to this ordinance, they do.
Yeah, that would never happen. That would be appealed. And I'll tell you who would appeal that. The Builders Association would appeal that because that would require a well to be drilled on every lot. And so the burden would be $8,000 per lot.
Well, no, they do it in a manner that is, they use test wells.
The only way that you can test is by drilling wells.
Right.
I know, but I don't think you have to do it for every single lot, but I don't know. I told you, it's very confusing to me.
Yeah.
If Buckingham Township doesn't have any development that utilize what Jake is doing, then they would not know whether or not the preemption exists for specific laws that would include him. Buckingham Township has a lot of commercial operations, so the preemption is for the commercial operations. That doesn't mean that there aren't things on here that can't be challenged for residential usage, like Jake is saying.
I don't understand what you're saying.
If Buckingham,
Preemption?
yeah, preemption, which is where something that's written on an ordinance can be held up in court. So if Buckingham Township does not have developments that are doing what Jake is doing, they may not have ever had that aspect of this ordinance taken to court to find out whether or not it would hold up. What Buckingham Township has is a plethora of commercial operations. So the operations for the commercial wells have been taken to court and have held up. Do you see what I mean? It depends on whether or not that part of the ordinance has been taken to court for them to know whether or not it's really going to hold up for preemption. So Jake is right. It may not hold up at all for his section because just because it's in here does not mean that it would hold up if a development were to open up down there and do what Jake is doing.
But that's it. But what he was just saying earlier, right, I sort of stopped listening, because he's saying that if he sells a piece of property to somebody, he doesn't have to make sure that that tests right for a well. That was said before.
So water is so prevalent in our area 80% of residential properties are in residential wells. And it's just a given that they will find a suitable well space on their property and there'll be suitable water. The only way you get unsuitable water is if there's pollution. There's a group in Carbon County called the Carbon County Groundwater Guardians. They have standards that say how the well should be constructed and that it should be grouted. And I adopted those standards already in my developments. My house that was just built, the well was put in according to the Groundwater Guardian standards, all right? It was grouted. If you grout the well, that seals the well from allowing anything on the surface from getting into the water supply. That's really what should be done.
Okay, but you do.
Well, what it's doing in here for a subdivision of your side, that would be a class 3 well classification.
Yes, I would have to
And
go through
you would have to
DEP.
do 3 observation wells. So you don't have to do wells on each and every lot.
Correct, in other
You
words,
do 3 for the development.
right, Jay would kind of get the developer has to get an overview of if there's gonna be, you know, adequate supply of good quality, basically.
Well, see, that's called a community water supply, and DEP tests all that stuff. and
Well,
provides all the
Jake,
things.
no, we're not specifying on your community water supply, we're just using your development as a sample.
All right.
That's all. Because I'm thinking it would be each individual lot.
So the
If
way
your well,
that
you know, yours would be one, because it's a community, yeah.
Right. The way that I would understand it is if somebody came in with a 100-lot subdivision, what that developer would have to do, we say 3 test wells, they have to do 3 test wells to see if they can find adequate water supply and of good quality. And then that's all that the developer would be required to do. And then when the lots are sold, then the individual lot owner would be responsible for meeting the standards in the ordinance in terms of class 1 well. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess before we get into doing this real heavily, shouldn't the council decide, you know, how they want to handle it?
Well, yeah, but the council's gonna ask some questions, and
Sure.
we don't, I mean, I'm just trying to see if I can,
Clarify this.
yeah. On this page 18, number 2, I have no idea if this is a typo or if it's an actual word. In that first paragraph, in the second sentence, must include testing criteria in table 5-1, infra.
I thought that was a typo, but I also had a lot of confusion on this page, so I left it open because I thought that we would talk about what it all means here.
Okay. And they also mentioned area of influence, which I'm sure is a general term, but I don't know what that is.
Infra means later in this writing or below, so whatever.
Later in what?
It must include the testing criteria in table V-1. Infra means like below or following. In other words, there must be a table on 5-1 later on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's on page 21. So what it's saying is that it has to comply with A, B, whatever it is, A through F, plus the testing criteria in table 1. Just cross it out and say which follows.
And say what?
What it means is it must include the testing criteria in table V-1, comma, which follows, comma, as well as the following.
Really?
Yeah, that's what that infra means.
A couple other terms, deepest water bearing zone, weather zone,
Where is that?
that's on page 20.
Where is that?
D2 is the deepest water bearing zone
Yeah.
of the test well.
Is that water bearing
And
one
then
again?
number 4 is the weather zone.
Well, I think the deepest water bearing zone would be where there, the deepest point where there's water available in the bedrock. That's what that would mean. And then, let me see. liquid zone, oh. In other words, if they're, let's say if they're drilling a well and it's more in sand and gravel, or the rock is like a shale or something that's very loose, that's, then have to put a casing in. Okay, when I drilled my well, you know, the bedrock, I think, was like 2 feet under the ground, and, you know, in that case, it didn't need casing. But they put it in anyway, but in any case, I also had to go 520 feet, but.
Okay. On 21, with the chart, the number of observation wells in well classification 2. You have 2 of them that say 1 and then 1 that says 2. And then in the note number 2 below, says it's a minimum of 2. So that's a contradictory there. One shall be on strike and the other perpendicular to strike, whatever that means.
Well, the strike is how the bedrock
Okay.
lies.
On page 26, in A, where it says that the applicant should be responsible for any adverse effects to any residential domestic water supply well. My question would be, does this include the borough wells? Because those wells are for the domestic water supply.
I think that there is a section that talks about the distance that would be included in the adverse effects. So if the borough, maybe it's up to a mile, so if it's within a mile of where the operation is, then for 60 months, it would be assumed that if there was an adverse effect, that it was because of the drilling operation.
Okay, but I just want to be sure that, you know, the borough is a very large well, and the borough is not a resident, that's why I want to make sure that.
We could include it.
Because it is for,
Yeah, okay.
include language, make sure that it is. So I guess the next step with this is to present this draft to council and request instructions on how they want to move forward. It's unfortunately, it wasn't easy to get any kind of samples, so this is really the extent of what we got.
All right.
I'm an excellent researcher. I can find more samples for sure. I haven't tried to look yet, but
Okay.
I already have like pulled up on my laptop the list of every township in Bucks County. So I'll get to it. And I'll send out as many as I can find.
So,
All right, so we'll put this on council's agenda for a well ordinance.
so if you're gonna adopt the well ordinance.
Now wait,
I'm sorry.
what? Well,
They're gonna have time to read this.
I know they're gonna need time to read it, along with everything else that they have on their
Right.
meeting thing. But although I need to also pull out our well ordinance
Right.
and check out the differences.
I still think,
Who knows, maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised and it'll be very much like this, and we won't have to do anything.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
getting back to the large-scale water extraction in the zoning ordinance. I mean, if you're gonna do a separate well ordinance that's gonna govern how all wells are, drilled and abandoned, I still think we need to have some, have this regulation in the zoning ordinance, and then we could refer to the well ordinance, saying it has to comply with that as well, but maybe then this would apply to non-residential.
So I do have a question then. Okay, so let's say that we do that. Let's say that we adopt this and we don't have this finished. So what happens if, as soon as we adopt this, a company comes and puts in a permit and then we don't have our well ordinance finished? What happens then?
No, I'm not saying to
I misunderstood.
If you are going to adopt a well ordinance, I still think we need to have this in the zoning ordinance.
The well ordinance in the zoning ordinance?
No, the well ordinance would be a standalone ordinance.
You want to have this in the zoning ordinance?
We would have the large-scale water withdrawal
Yeah.
in the zoning ordinance
And then
for the zoning districts that you want it in, and anything particular for zoning that you want to include, but also include that you must follow the borough's well ordinance.
Okay, and if we don't have the well ordinance complete before?
What we're saying is that
They would be in
go
conjunction? Okay. I want to talk about the base flow on here, on the large-scale water extraction.
The what flow?
The
Base flow?
base flow, it's it's the second to last page. Mine doesn't have a number, I'm sorry. So the natural Q7 base flow rate is based on our worst drought, and it could go back to the 60s. So essentially, a company could continue to pump water even if our water supply got lowered to the lowest drought using that number. It's the base level that you could go. It was recommended that we change that to a 25% ADF, which is an average daily flow.
Change it to what?
25% ADF, which is a daily average flow, or a P75%, which is a monthly flow. I did go into the USGS stream stats, and they showed me how to work the programming and how to kind of find all these things, but they were clear that it would be the company's responsibility to be able to come up with this type of number. But we just want to make sure that we change the Q7, because that means that it could, again, I just want to be clear that they could go down to below drought levels, and we still wouldn't be able to say, hey, you're pumping too much water.
So what are they recommending that we should have?
25% ADF, which is 25% of the average daily flow, so if it gets below that number. Or they said we could also do it based on a monthly flow. There's really not too big of a difference. All of the numbers were included in the USGS stats that I looked at. So that would be for helping to regulate our stream, and obviously not the well water. That would be the natural flow of the water. For our creeks.
Okay, so 25% of average daily flow of
Wherever, let's say
all water, that's...
well, whatever creek or stream would be impacted, right? So let's say they go into the industrial zone down by Roberts Run Creek. If the Roberts Run Creek or seems to be below a certain level, then operations would have to cease. But using the number that we have, that's a drought number. So it essentially means that, our creek may be up to here, but during a drought, it's down to here. So it could be pumped down to here on a regular basis, and we wouldn't have any recourse to say, hey, you're taking too much.
That makes sense, but you also have to remember that I forget what the percentage is, I just read it recently, but a fairly significant percentage of water in the river and streams is from groundwater. They're actually connected,
Okay.
so, but, that makes sense. You have can you email me a link to what?
Yep. It's the USGS. It's, actually, I have all the instructions written on the back here. It has to go through a certain step, so I'll try to explain.
I just want to get the verbiage correct.
It's okay. It's okay, yeah.
So Carson, for the zoning,
Right.
so if we stick with our draft stuff here, and we work on the well ordinance,
Right.
can we put something in this section? Well, we have to put something in that they have to follow the well ordinance. Put
Correct.
something that the stricter of the two apply, or if something ends up being conflicting?
Yeah, they have that written in the other one multiple times, like whichever one is more restrictive, our law or the DEP, DRBC law.
Well, we can, but I guess,
No DRBC.
you can always get
No
something like
DRBC.
that.
Oh, sure.
I heard even the DRBC recommended the DEP standards.
They won't
That's
shut
what,
off your water to save Philadelphia. I'm telling you.
I talked to the geologists in charge of these. I don't know how the rest of the
DRBC
agency
only
works.
has one person's interest in mind, their own,
Yeah,
not yours.
all right.
Yes.
All right. So I guess what I'll do is, I think, we had talked about making this off-site or on-site. So I think in the zoning ordinance, this would be just applying this to off-site consumption, because the well ordinance would address residential.
Well, we also, on-site consumption includes fracking operations and things like that. So, you know, what happens if a gas line wants to come and put a well up here too? Then we don't have any regulations for them to follow.
Okay, so why don't we just say off-site, why don't we say non-residential off-site or on-site?
Okay.
Okay. So I'll try to I'll put together another draft based on the comments that we've had so far. And then you all can tear it apart again, which is part of the process.
That's our job.
That's right.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know when you came back in.
Did you go over the distances under isolation distances? Are they set? The distance from other extraction, subsource,
Which one are you looking at?
isolation distance under
Our
vehicles,
draft or Buckingham?
our draft.
You mean in the zoning?
Under
Zoning draft.
this 5-page thing that we're looking
Right.
at.
Okay.
Right.
It's like the fourth page near the top, there's isolation distance.
Okay,
1,000 feet from other commercial extraction facilities, 100 feet from, and then 50 feet. I think you told me that in the state of Pennsylvania, did you
Oh,
tell me
here,
something
here,
about
it's in here actually.
storage from a well or?
Look at,
Well, the tanks can, I think DEP's tanks can be 50, but any absorption areas have to be 100.
So
That's not right, Jake?
Yes, that's right.
the, that's actually on the
Right.
well draft ordinance, and while you were gone, we discussed that we are going to submit to council that we should consider a well ordinance to go in conjunction with this.
Yeah, but we're gonna change the distances, that's my question.
You're changing the distance?
No, I'm asking, are we keeping the same distances?
I think so,
No,
be
that's the way
consistent,
it's
yes.
now, even with oil tanks or anything, if that's the distance it has to be.
Yeah.
That's what your SEO checks when he approves the well permit and the septic permits. He checks all those distances.
so Mike, to bring it up to the rest of the conversation. We're going to present to council the Buckingham ordinance. I will copy the borough's well ordinance also, so you can look at them for comparison. But we believe that this should be a standalone well ordinance. We can have the stuff in our zoning for the large-scale, non-residential, off-site, on-site consumption. But it will also reference that they need to follow everything in the well ordinance, plus like it does with the DEP regs and those others also, and that whichever is stricter shall apply. So we need to get, council needs to decide if they want to have a standalone well ordinance to this extent. And again, I haven't read ours, I should have pulled it out, I just didn't have time. And if they do want to update our well ordinance, then they need to move forward on that as a separate ordinance, not part of this, because it's not part of this project.
That would seem to make sense.
I just also want to confirm, we're going to do it in the industrial zone, because I know,
Can't hear you.
I want to confirm whether or not we're leaving it in the industrial zone. I know there was some conversation last time about whether or not we were going to try to rezone it. I just had that on my list here.
So we're saying we'll be in the industrial district.
Yeah,
Did you want it in a different district?
No, there was like some talk about the poop plant and some other stuff, so I didn't know if there was other suggestions as to where we should. I'm fine with the I district. It seems set for, that's what it's for, so.
Mike?
I think it should just be the industrial district.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll take the crack at doing that and get it out to you.
Okay.
Hey, I got, Carson, one other thing, quick.
Oh, you already had your chance.
There's a minor thing,
They
again.
didn't keep them long enough either.
Where are you at, Mike?
You should have stayed
Well,
at the
I'm-
meeting.
On the first page, I got a lot of hats I wear, I told you that. On the bottom, this is just a reference, in the red, number 3, so it talks about an undeveloped area,
Right.
and then when you go down to A, it talks about a setback area, which is pretty much what you're describing, but you're not calling it the setback area.
Oh, so that should be in the undeveloped area.
I just think you should call them the same thing.
Yeah,
See,
no, I agree. I agree. I'll change that.
An undeveloped setback area?
No, just in the undeveloped area.
Oh, so down at the bottom, okay.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Now, at the last meeting, you started on the Saldo,
Right.
right? How far did you get with that?
Well, the last meeting, we didn't have
We didn't have one.
we didn't have one.
Oh,
Right, so what we were planning on doing now
All right, all
was
done, guys.
start,
We didn't have form.
no.
so at the next meeting, what we'll do is start at the beginning of the saldo,
Okay,
all right?
yep.
Next meeting, so.
What's the change?
Good to go.
next meeting being the 4th Monday again.
Yep.
So Jessica, you look at hazardous waste dumping taking place on Mount Pisgah, that's right above the Jim Thorpe water supply,
What?
on top of Mount Pisgah.
Who's thinking hazardous waste on top of
Okay.
Mount
Good
Pisgah?
night, Carson.
For years, I've been
Yeah.
complaining about it, nobody's done anything.
Send me an email. Can you send me,
So,
can,
so if, I can show you on Google Earth. You wanna see it?
I don't know if I wanna see this.
I mean, we're focusing on, water quality and stuff like that.
I know that people dump trash up there sometimes, it rains on bears.
Well, this is industrial.
Oh.
They're filling in the strip lines with,
Who's they?
well, I guess it's, Toll Brothers, Lehigh Colon Navigation.
How are they allowed to do that?
GDP's approval, but it's still not right.
Are we allowed to say no more?
I don't know, it's not gonna say no more. I brought this up 10 years ago at the Chamber of Commerce, and everybody just sort of looked at me.
I was sure you'd be there, because I told
But, I mean, if you wanna do something.
Oh, I'll address it. I'll address it.
Google Earth. Let it zoom in.
Hazardous waste being dumped, apparently. That's behind my house.
Where are you at?
A lot around at the house, around Promised Land. And stuff.
And I really think he should, I thought that yesterday, I'm sure he would have wanted to make it.
It's a McDade Trail.
There is,
It goes from Shawnee to Delaware to Milford.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice because it's, some of it's straight by the fields, but you wind
Yes,
through a lot
at
of
least.
through pine trees and stuff. And there's a few
Okay.
nasty hills.
You show me on Google Earth.
Here's Mock Chunk Lake,
Yeah.
this is Mock Chunk Creek and your thing.
Oh, we do that.
Look at this.
Yeah, and then the other one we wanna do
Hazardous waste dumping.
is there's a heritage
I just
from York down to
I just thought
See the
that
piles?
that was somebody's
so we wanna try to do that.
property that they clear. Is that why there's no trees up there?
If it's like rails.
Well, it's because there's strip mining, but
Okay.
these piles here,
That's nice.
there's trucks that go through Nesquehoning and Jim Thorpe all the time. They're going up there to dump hazardous waste.
Okay. All right, I'll look into that.
So,
Who's it from? The train company?
Yeah, the part we do,
no,
we actually went
not from the train.
Oh, Lehigh.
So Lehigh Colon Navigation is owned by Toll Brothers right now.
Okay.
Okay, they probably have a separate name, but you see, this is on the mountain, Mount Pisgah Mountain. This is Jim Thorpe, this is Mock Chunk Lake, and here's the Jim Thorpe water supply inlet right here. So
Interesting.
when it goes there, where do you think water rains down to? Into the Mock Chunk Lake, into the Mock Chunk Creek, into the,
Well, it goes in, yeah, it goes right into my, I mean, I live right along there. I live on the trail. So I could just walk up there. I guess I'll have to take a nice walk and go see it with my own eyes. Or I could just ride the quad up there.
the best way to do it is, this is Redner's.
Go up through Nesquehoning. Oh yeah, that is much quicker than going up through
And,
Seminole.
and this is where you see the coal operations, this is the strip mine.
Okay.
But you're talking about wells going dry and stuff like that. Do you know how deep that hole is?
Okay.
Do you see any water in it?
No.
What do you think they do when they blast
All
that?
right.
Okay, maybe there is some. No, that's coal.
My mom's outside if you want to come say hi.
Yeah, I do.
She gave me a ride. I have something so funny to tell you guys. I have something so funny to tell you. I'm still in my live stream. I gotta go through my comments. She's over there. You recognize by the bike rack, you know? All right.
I don't know if I saw far with the bike rack.
Oh, I was gonna say
She was going up the bike on the mountain.
yeah, she keeps the bike rack on the back of the car. Okay, so do you guys hear that? How I was like trying to make the difference between consumption and non-consumption, and I was saying that I was starting to argue that no, on-site consumption is for fracking, and I got pushback, and I had to keep going on after this. I'll do another live when I get home to discuss what happened. So the guy that I was arguing with that with works for the nonprofit that is corporately sponsored by a gas company that does fracking. And he was giving me shit because the regulation that we have was only supposed to be to do water bottles. And I was like, what about fracking? And he's like, well, fracking is off-site consumption. And I'm like, no, it is not. It takes the water up and it pushes it back down. And I know that he works for the nonprofit that's corporately sponsored by the gas company that does fracking, Pecco Gas, and they are part of the Mariner pipeline here in Pennsylvania. But I don't think he knows that I know that. So I just think it's really funny that he was arguing with me about that, and he didn't want to include fracking on this ordinance. Well, another one, Natural Lands Trust. They're big with the gas company. Wildlands Conservancy is the water bottle company. So I'm going to read through my comments real quick, guys, but I'm going to be in the car, so I'm not going to talk quite yet. And then when I get home, I'm going to take screenshots of the questions so that I can... I'm just putting I have like a phone. This is my little stand here. But, here's what I want you guys to do. I posted a video about this, about how I was going to have the meeting. That's where I had the scheduled one. It was like, we're going in tonight. Can you leave questions that you may have had or comments that you may have had about this meeting and put it on that video so that I can make video responses to it? I will get back on a live stream, but usually as soon as Natural Lands Trust. I'm going to wait till they're done talking because I'm on my live stream. All right, I'm scrolling up through my comments here really quick.
I know. Well, no, not an extra month. You'll be there till spring. The market doesn't come back in spring. No.
Oh my God, somebody came in here and said Jesus loves us. Okay, well, why don't you tell Jesus to come down here and regulate these companies? Jesus. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm still on a live stream, so I was trying not to catch your conversation on my phone. I'm just trying to be polite. Yes, but I needed both devices tonight because I had to live stream from 2 different apps.
Jess, you're late. Oh my God.
Yeah, it took for. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. I didn't realize what time it was.
Did you get my text?
I was on my laptop, so I don't get the alerts from it.
You didn't get the text?
No, I didn't get it.
Jake? I'm like, please don't bring up.
Oh no!
That's all right.
And I did just that.
It's more about me.
Okay, I'm on a live stream, so.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, don't you. Right, that's what I'm saying.
No, but did you mute me just now?
No, I can't mute it. It's not a town live stream, it's my TikTok live stream. That's what I was saying when I was getting in the car. I'm just scrolling up to read through my questions.
You didn't do anything wrong.
Okay.
How's your voice?
It's a little strained after that meeting, I can tell you that much.
I hope it went well.
Yeah,
Did they pick at you?
of course. Not as bad as I picked at them, though, so don't worry about that.
Good. Here, baby, I got you some water.
Thank you, just give me 1 second. of the comments.
So, can I talk now?
Almost. Oh, they said they didn't hear anything.
Yeah, right.
They just heard me talking about it. Okay, I'm gonna go ask your questions on that last video that I made about the meeting that I was going tonight, and I'll make response videos. So if you want to know what we were talking about or what parts of legislation, I can focus on that. All right, I'll see you guys in a bit.